It's no secret that the clothing industry has been scamming us out of our money for selling us these tattered pieces of fabric they call clothing. Clothes just aren't as good quality, they don't last as long, and even the sizing on some of them is weird. Many people have talked about having clothes for several years compared to the clothes that they have today from the same store and how it doesn't last nearly as long. So the clothing industry is just not where it needs to be. And I know in the title I say exposing, but this isn't necessarily anything new. However, how consistent are these disparities in stores? If I were to go to a few stores in the same area, would they all have the same clothing standards? How easily spottable would these quality conundrums be if I were to investigate in person? Well, there's only one way to find out. There's a shopping complex like 5 minutes away from my school that has 3 big clothing stores: Target, Marshalls, and Ross. And I decided to go into each of those stores and do some good old observational research, specifically on the quality and the materials of the clothing. We'll get into the specifics of that later, to see how many clothing items I could easily find having these issues that people are seeing nowadays. And I started with everyone's favorite.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Target!
So I started immediately in the front area with a brand called Universal Thread. I'm not familiar with shopping in Target because I don't really get clothes from there, but it's one of Target's brands that they have. And they seem to pride themselves in using recycled material, which is always a good thing. The material on the sweaters did feel pretty soft too, but feeling doesn't always mean good quality. I have things that feel really, really nice, but are ended up made of a lot of cheap synthetic material, or it's just not made well. And speaking of materials, let's just get into the specifics of that. First of all, any material that is used or made for clothing is going to take up some type of energy. It is going to be somewhat bad for the environment. However, natural materials, generally speaking, are better for the environment. They are also easier to decompose and recycle rather than synthetic materials. Natural materials are like cotton, linen, silk, cashmere. They also tend to be more comfortable and breathable, and also tend to last a little bit longer. I didn't realize how rare it was, or at least when I say rare, I mean how little stores are using 100% cotton or mainly cotton in their clothing. I ended up checking my own closet just out of curiosity to see, and I don't remember finding a single item that was mainly cotton or fully cotton. It was either a blend or just completely synthetic. And just a quick side note, cotton can also be cheap too. You can get a cheaper cotton and an expensive cotton, so there's a whole range there. But anyways, the synthetic materials, generally speaking, are not as good for the environment, as they take longer to break down because it is plastic. Because it's plastic, it is not as breathable and not as comfortable. So synthetic materials tend to make you hotter, however they are cheaper. So that was one thing I was looking for, just to see how many clothes I could find that had more natural material than synthetic. But in Target, I was pleasantly surprised that a lot of the clothes that I found were made from fully cotton or more cotton. If there were ever blends, it would be a lot less of the synthetic that was a part of it. So essentially it was made of more natural materials than the man-made ones. But then again, I was looking mainly in that one section with that one brand, so I probably should have spaced out my research a little bit, which I did end up doing later on. But something else that I noticed, that the stitching on these clothing was pretty well done as well. So I have done so much research before this video to figure out what actually makes good quality clothing. I read a bunch of articles, blogs from fashion experts and people who know what they're talking about, a whole lot of videos as well. And like I said, what I got it down to is the material, that's a big part of it, but also the stitching, the way that the clothing is put together in the first place. Specifically when it comes to stitching, the patterns, the spacing. So the gist of it is that the stitches shouldn't really be too bulky. They should lay neat and flat. The stitches should be very clean and even, and they should have a high number of stitches per inch. That increases the longevity of the piece of clothing so that it's not falling apart. The stitches are very close together. And there should be very minimal to no loose threads. You don't want a bunch of stray ends because that means you could easily pull them and they could go undone. Well done stitching is neat and tight so that the clothing stays together for a long time. And the stitches on these clothing were pretty clean for my untrained eye. I did find a few loose threads on some dresses and some pants that I found, but it wasn't major. They were very small areas. I tugged on the stitching just a little bit just to see if anything would come undone, and it seemed pretty secure. So I was honestly really impressed with Target and what I was seeing there. Again, this is just my one experience by going there, so maybe other people had different experiences. I mean, they weren't high end, but they weren't bad either. At least not compared to what I found at the next store, which is Ross. Now, Ross is the place that I normally go to shop for discount clothes. And in the beginning, everything was pretty tame. You had your normal shirts, nothing too crazy. A lot of them was made of polyester. I did notice a lot of the clothes I was looking through was either a polyester blend or just 100% polyester, not as much cotton as there was in Target. But you know, up until then, everything seemed fine. Until it wasn't. So I first found this plain cream colored shirt with a sequin pocket on it, or at least what was supposed to be a sequin pocket, except that it was practically gone. The pocket was half ripped off and the stitching was almost completely undone. And the pocket was the whole highlight of the shirt. Like, that shirt has nothing else going for it. It's a plain shirt with a pocket. And they had the audacity to sell it for $8. And it's not even discounted. You'll see later on, I'll show you some shirts where it looks like it's coming apart and they'll discount it at the very least. This shirt wasn't even discounted. They're selling this thing at full price. It wasn't even worth $8 if the pocket was there to begin with. And it's so funny that I found a tag on it that said "keep away from fire" in big bold letters, because that's kind of where it belongs right now. Next, I found this green shirt with a very long thread hanging from it. Again, it was just a plain green shirt, nothing too special, but clearly the threading was not very well done. I found this red shirt that was like right next to it with the little star embroidered on it coming completely undone. I mean, so many of the threads were loose and coming off. And you know those kind of shirts with that like roughish design where it's kind of like you iron it on, kind of like you make your own print on shirts at home, that kind of like rough speckled material. You know what I'm talking about? That was the material for the design, and it already looked like it was coming off. There were speckles everywhere. It looked like it was peeling before it even got the chance to leave the store. I really hope that this shirt was brought back by somebody who had it in their closet and maybe didn't take good care of it and just remembered to take it back. I really hope that that's the explanation for the shirt, and not that it came straight out the warehouse looking like this and they were like, looks good to me. But they did have it on sale for $3, rightfully so. I will say I did find a lot of shirts with that slippery kind of curtain feeling material, like silk, but it wasn't silk, it was the synthetic version, whatever that is. They're all like these small, very sheer shirts that was like one layer of fabric. I'll get back to that a little bit later. There was this one baby fat shirt that was just horrible. Like, the inside was so bad. The outside looked clean, but you flip over in the inside and the threads are just coming off. Like, I could very easily pull them and they would just come apart. That shirt was not gonna last for more than a year. And it's messed up because Baby Fat is like a name brand technically, right? So you would expect a little bit better quality from them. But that just shows that expensive does not always equal good quality, which would be another really interesting thing, I think, to go in person and investigate, like going into name brand stores and like luxury stores like Coach and Louis Vuitton or something like that, and see how the stitching and stuff is done in their clothing to see if it's actually made well. Anyways, let me know if you guys would want to see that though. So I went to the pants section after this because I realized I haven't really been looking at the bottoms as much. And I feel like the sewing job on pants is particularly important, especially if the threading is a different color than the jeans, which most of the time it is by design, of course. So they kind of have to make it look good and clean. But what about the inside? For a lot of them, the threading looked pretty okay. There was nothing too out of the ordinary. But for some other pants, very similar to the Baby Fat shirt, the inside was just very bulky and not well done. Like, the sewing job looked very choppy and also loose. Like, I could very easily pull the threads the same way and they would come loose. So Ross was pretty disappointing, and I never realized how many errors you can find when you're actually looking for them. So that was pretty enlightening as somebody who does shop there regularly. But don't worry, I will be back for a part 2 to give Ross a second chance. But it was getting a little late and I had to head home, so I left the investigation for next week. Marshalls. Now, thankfully, I did not get attacked by any middle-aged women who were searching for Hello Kitty themed items, so we got out unscathed. I'm okay. I went straight for the sweater section because there were people in the other aisles, and like the hermit crabs that I am, I tried to avoid human contact and life at all times by all means necessary. Now, material-wise, for Marshalls, they look like they use a lot of natural synthetic blends or just a lot of synthetic materials in one shirt. The stitching looked pretty okay. There was nothing too out of the ordinary just yet. I did notice something about this flannel shirt that I was looking at because I remember watching this one video from this fashion expert who was saying something about the like the stitching, basically the way that the patterns flow with each other and the other parts of the shirt, if that makes sense. So basically, after a shirt is cut in order to sew the rest of the pattern on, it's supposed to be a very smooth line and transition from each pattern. It should continue smoothly. But on this shirt, it was not. Like, it was very choppy and blocked, like they didn't continue the pattern. I don't think that necessarily means it wasn't good quality or well made, but it's just something that caught my eye because I remember someone saying that. But yeah, a lot of synthetic blends. I've noticed that Marshall uses a lot of different synthetic materials. A lot of the clothes had like 50 this, 20 that. I assumed to replicate the feeling of like natural materials by adding some elasticity and all that other stuff that needs to be within the clothing. So they use a lot of different materials. That's just my guess though. Like I said, I don't know what I'm talking about. Something else I've been forgetting to check are the buttons and the zippers, like I was saying last time, how well they're sewn on. If they're loose or they're not well sewn on, obviously that's not very good because buttons, you're always messing with them. So you don't want them to pop off easily. Of course, you could always sew them back on, but it just needs to be done well the first time. Then I found this really cute shirt for $8. And like there were a few loose threads and the hemming was, a little choppy and the cuts were a little uneven. But I mean, for $8, I don't even wear crop shirts, but it would look cute over like a dress or a turtleneck or something like that. I didn't buy it though. Then I found the very first 100% cotton item in the store, which was just a regular graphic tee. A lot of the graphic tees did have cotton, like either 100% cotton or like 90% cotton. I noticed when it comes to just regular basic t-shirts, they seem to use more cotton than anything. But again, cotton can also be bought very cheap. So that's just something to keep in mind. But yeah, I was finding pretty much the same results. Again, a lot of synthetic blends, but the hemming and the stitching looked pretty okay. But I can't say the same for the pants, because when I got to the pants, it was just night and day from the shirts and the jackets. It's like they didn't put any time in the bottoms at all. There were so many loose ends and stray threads. Some of them I could very easily pull out of the stitching. The hemming and the threading was really botched at some of the seams and just very choppy looking. The buttons on some of the pants were very loose and dangling, like they were not on secure like they should be. It's just weird that they put so much effort into the tops but didn't with the bottoms. I don't know if maybe they thought people wouldn't care or notice. Now, as promised, I wanted to go back and give Ross a second chance because maybe I caught them on a bad day. It had time over the weekend to straighten themselves out, so I was like, let me go back, let me double check, see if, maybe they cleaned up their act over the weekend. So I went there the next week to see if I could find any atrocities like before. There was nothing too out of the ordinary, except for this one plain white shirt that had stains on it. Those aren't shadows, by the way. That's not the camera playing tricks on your eyes. Like, those are dark spots. And it's definitely not by design. I don't know why it was so dirty. I don't know if maybe it happened in the store. I'm gonna hope maybe it did happen in the store. Maybe it dropped and someone stepped on it. Once again, I'm hoping it did not leave the warehouse like that. The cream shirt with the sequin pocket was still there. So, and they still didn't mark it down. But something else that I noticed. So I said earlier how a lot of the shirts were these very thin sheer fabric, one layer shirts, right? These very thin sheer shirts that are made with like one layer of fabric. I just thought about how easy it is to get away with clothes that look like that. And some people may probably be like, oh, well, it's supposed to be like that because it's supposed to be cropped, or it's, it's a summer shirt, so it's supposed to be thin, so it's easy to breathe in or whatever, so it's cooler. Yeah, I bet the manufacturers were using the same exact excuse. The shirts are so easy and lazy to make. I've made shirts that looked like that before with my dank-ass sewing skills. Like, this literally looks like something I could make in a day if I really wanted to, which I don't. The fabric doesn't look very sturdy or comfy either. Like I said, it's literally like the thinnest one layer piece of fabric. Like, it is so thin. They just sewed in certain places and threw on a shelf. Again, it's just funny to me that they can get away with selling those types of clothing, especially in the summertime, because that's their excuse, and charge like $10-15 for it. And I could easily make like a ton of those, just buy my own fabric from Joann Fabric or something. I can make a bunch of those shirts. But other than that, I didn't find anything too out of whack at Ross. I didn't spend as much time there though, but I didn't find the monstrosities that I found last time. So it seems like they cleaned themselves up a little bit. Now, I did go to Burlington, but I kind of sped through the store because I had to go to class. But I just found a few of the normal loose threads, bad hemming shirts I could definitely make myself for way cheaper. Like I said, I didn't spend too much time and look that thoroughly in the store. So I'm not really going to include a lot of what I found here simply because I feel like I didn't spend that much time on it. So what's the moral of this entire video and the research that I've done? I don't know. I want to make something clear. The point of this video was not to try and guilt people with their shopping choices. We all contribute to the problems of the clothing industry one way or another. Yes, there are ways that you can be mindful of where you shop and how much you shop, but ultimately this isn't me saying that we shouldn't shop at these stores anymore, because I still do. People have a tendency to get very up in arms when you point out certain things and certain things that they buy regularly, because it kind of makes them feel like their way of life is being threatened. And it can also bring a lot of guilt shopping at the places that you're shopping at. Like, you'll always see people comment things like,
oh, so we can't even shop places now? Oh, well, some of us don't have the money to do.
It's very similar to like food, because of how bad we know that the food industry is, and how mostly all of it is just processed, and it's so hard to get good, like, natural food without a lot of ingredients that are harmful. But when you try pointing this out and like making it clear the ingredients that may be in certain foods that are very bad for you, oh, so we can't even eat food now? Oh, you guys are just nitpicking at everything. Oh, everything we buy is, like, again, it's that threatened, my way of life is being threatened type of feeling that people get. I'm not telling you where to shop, that you shouldn't or should shop in certain places. I normally don't try to do that. I will bring things to light, but it is ultimately your decision as an individual on what you choose to do with that information. It doesn't stop the information from existing. So this video really was just meant to be just a fun observational research type of experiment to see the problems of the clothing industry in real time and in person. You hear about it, people talk about it on the internet, but it's another thing to actually go in person and look out for these things, because on a daily basis, we probably aren't. My favorite type of research is observational, simply because I just like to observe and watch things. So it was really just a way for me to solidify what we already know and see how consistent it is within a shopping complex. Just for a quick disclaimer, this research is not meant to be very scientifically and mathematically accurate. There's obviously so many variables that could skew my data and skew what I saw in the stores, the timing that I went in there, the fact that I only went once. I didn't look at every single piece of clothing that existed, because that just wouldn't be possible for me. There's so many different things that could have happened on why I caught certain clothes being the way that they are, certain stores being the way that they are. So while you don't have to stop shopping at certain places completely, you could be mindful of what you're buying, paying attention to the quality of the product, and seeing if you're getting your money's worth. I mean, ultimately, you're paying for these clothes. You want them to last you with at least a couple decades or so. So I'm not saying that every single store you go into, you have to be looking at the inside, looking at what the makeup is, and looking for loose threads. But if you happen to notice it, keep that in mind, that, hey, this probably wasn't well made, or hey, this probably won't last you a very long time. So maybe you'll want to look for something else or go to a different place that has better quality in their clothing. It's never a bad idea to be aware of these things rather than to be completely afraid and dodging these types of things. You don't want these things to dictate your life, obviously, but it's never a bad idea to keep them in the back of your mind when you're going shopping. In my opinion, ignorance is nothing close to bliss at all. I prefer to stay educated and updated on certain things when it comes to the things I'm putting money into. Now, one thing I do want to throw in there, because I feel like I'm going to see people say this, is the men's section, and that I should go to the men's section or should have went to the men's section to compare their clothing, because a lot of people say that men's clothing is actually made better. They have better quality and stuff like that. I didn't do that because I wanted to focus mainly on the women this time around. I wanted to focus on our clothing. I didn't want to make any comparisons yet. I wanted to see our clothing for what it is rather than comparing it to something else, because that could skew my perception of it. However, if you guys would like, I could go back into these same stores and do an investigation and a research on men's clothing instead and see if it actually is better quality, like some people tend to say. So we'll see how that goes, but that's all I have for you today. So thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.